Welcome to the I Now Pronounce You Divorced podcast, where we have three award-winning family law attorneys dive into intriguing topics like divorce, military divorce, custody and visitation, trust and estate planning, and all things family law. Join us as we provide a comprehensive viewpoint through the eyes of our experts and guests, aiming to educate and soothe our listeners. Get ready to tune in because I Now Pronounce You Divorced starts right now.
Welcome back to I Now Pronounce You Divorced. I'm Charles Hatley, and today I'm joined by Mr. Dan Cuneo and a very special guest, and I will let her introduce herself now.
Well, good morning, Charles and Dan. Thanks for letting me join you in the conversation. I'm Karen McNenny, and I'm coming to you from the beautiful Rocky Mountains of Western Montana today.
Yeah, it's probably a pretty exciting time to be out there. You don't have to worry about all the hurricanes that tend to be heading our way lately. So, Karen, can you kind of describe to us what you do and why you would be part of a divorce podcast?
Absolutely. And I'm so delighted to talk to your listeners who, like me, might be feeling paralyzed as they consider divorce. I am a 13-year divorce survivor, as I like to say. My husband and I became a two-family household 13 years ago when our kids were 5 and 7. And honestly, guys, I felt paralyzed as I was looking at the prospect of my own marriage dissolving because I was afraid of the likes of you, the legal journey of divorce, and the prospect that I would end up with pounds of debt. There would be extraordinary despair and destruction in our family. Our kids would be destitute. It was sort of all the D words. And it occurred to me that maybe there's another way. Like maybe you can actually have a good divorce, which is two words that we don't hear put together very often. And the legal journey of divorce has become so much more complicated in recent time that we do need legal professionals like yourself to guide us through that process. But it really became clear to me that divorce is a family matter where children are involved with a legal component rather than a legal event with a little teeny family matter. So in essence, I have built the business that I was looking for 13 years ago when Michael and I began to navigate our own divorce. I have come from a background as a business consultant. I spent 20 plus years helping to create great places to work. I always say I'm an expert in the invisible parts of the workplace that impact visible outcomes. That's workplace culture and leadership development, employee engagement, customer service, all the people parts. And I had been speaking on the national stage, working with a variety of clients throughout the country. And during that wrinkle in time we all refer to as the pandemic, it gave me time to pause and really think about this topic that I've been so passionate for so long. And families from the outside were looking at our family and recognizing that, those two don't even act like they're divorced. They sit together at all of the activities. We see them laughing with their children. They still take family photos together. And so my corporate clients, members and employees there began asking me, what's your secret sauce, Karen? How do you do this? And I realized I had a lot to say about it. And so in recent years, I launched the Good Divorce Show, which is the podcast that I host on a weekly basis, where not only do I talk to experts like yourselves, but I also bring on families, couples, adult children of divorce who've done it well. We have a lot of stories out there about when it's blown up, how to lawyer up, how to take down and get as much as you can and fight to the bitter end. Well, there's other beautiful stories out there of how we entered into our divorce conversation with more compassion and grace, and how we can really come out the other side more dignified and less destroyed. So I am the Good Divorce Coach. I come to this work not only as a consultant, which might include project management, communication. Sometimes we need a press release to go out to all the grandparents who are worried about what's happening. I also am a certified mediator, a divorce coach, a co-parenting specialist, trained as a therapist back in the day. So I like to say I bring the whole package to support families through this process, except for the legal part. You will not catch me giving any legal advice. I leave that to the likes of you gentlemen.
I noticed just in your talking that you said husband, not ex-husband. You never said, hey, we have a broken family. You just said, hey, we have two households. In doing what you do, how important is the language that you use?
I'm so glad you picked up on this, Charles. It really does matter because how we talk about it becomes the reality that it is. And when I'm working with clients, we do a whole segment on just language. So we do try to resist the urge to X people out of our life. It's kind of a strong language barrier. So, yep, I refer to Michael either by his name or as the father of my children or my former spouse or as my husband. You'd have to ask him what he calls me.
Fair
We
enough.
also, rather than using language like mom's house, dad's house, we will refer to our homes by the street name, or maybe there's an identifier, the mountain house, the townhouse. We happen to live on streets that are names of people, Gilbert, Raymond, Lily. So we refer to our homes by their names. And I encourage my families that I guide through this process to do the same thing. And from very early on, we didn't talk about being a divorced family, certainly not a broken family. The marriage has ended, not the relationship. We have a forever relationship. And that's what I am passionate about protecting, is because the family lives on. The family is the family is the family. And Michael's family, who I was very close to and still remain close to, I no longer refer to them as my in-laws. They're now my outlaws.
Nice.
So there's lots of ways we can soften the language, which starts to change the story, not only for the couple that is experiencing the divorce, but for their children, because the story of the couple becomes the story of the children.
For our listeners who are tuning in, they're listening and they're thinking, "Well, I can never get there. I mean, I'm in such a contentious emotional situation." How do you handle clients who come to you? And I mean, I just noticed from litigating that usually the majority of the clients are at the lowest point in their lives. And it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and the well's been poisoned, and you go through such a tumultuous period of time. How do you walk them through that it will get better and this is what you need to do in order to heal and to know that the relationship does continue? And I agree with you. It's just the marriage itself is what is dissolving. You're not dissolving or ending the actual relationship. So how do you walk clients through who come in and then they're just at that lowest point in their life, and they're either very emotional or they just have so much anger and resentment towards their spouse?
Yeah. And, I'm going to back up the train just a little bit on that question, Dan, because this is a part where I think a lot of us facing divorce get it wrong, which is we wait too long. We actually wait too long to leave. And there is this paradigm shift that we forget divorce is intended. Divorce exists to improve the primary relationship, not make it worse. If you want it to get worse, stay in a bad marriage. It will get worse. But we don't see that off ramp. Well, I was going to say we don't see it early enough, but I don't think that's true. I think we often know our truth long before we speak it. But what happens is that unless it's on fire, we don't think we can go running out of the house. So people stay. And I am pro family and I am pro marriage, and I appreciate, like Michael and I, we went to couples counselor after couples counselor after couples counselor trying to save this marriage. And when it became clear that it was complete, that we were going to be a healthier family and we were going to be more vibrant, thriving parents for our children if we lived across two homes, that we started to make our exit. And oftentimes, I think families wait until there's the affair, there's swindling of money, there's the betrayals that begin to happen, so that now I can tell you how bad it is. There's almost an unconscious kind of kamikaze tailspin that we're going to blow this thing up on our way out the door. So that's the first thing I would say, listeners, is that if you are tuning in today and you're wavering, should I stay? Should I go? Are we in? Are we out? Which is its own kind of tormented purgatory. I know it. I've lived it. That messy middle is a really, really challenging time. If you can see the off ramp, then you come to that decision with some grace. And I would even say, well, there is still love. And that is a wildly different consideration. Not that we are in love. We know that the marriage is complete, but if we can find a pathway where I still respect you, I just can't be married to you anymore. I still care about you. I just don't want to be your roommate anymore. But we know that we're going to have a forever relationship. So how can we begin protecting that now? And then we don't end up in a highly litigated, contentious divorce. So that's a little caveat that if you can find the off ramp early enough in the journey, you can avoid a lot of that pain. But back to your direct question, Dan, when we have arrived in a place that is high conflict, and my work is really unique because my ideal clients are couples that come to me together. And that's when we get best outcome. I walk with both spouses side by side, working with them individually and together to design their divorce, to walk through the emotional work, and to come out the other side, not destroyed, but renovated, if you will. And for those of you that are already in the thick of it, what I would try to remind you is that the pain and the struggle that you're experiencing right now, it's temporary. It's not permanent. And that you are in charge of designing your divorce and making those decisions of what you're going to hold on to, that white knuckle rage and hate. And I remember having a day when I was so frustrated. I was so angry. And really, I love this quote from Krista Tippett. She says, is what pain looks like when it shows up in public. So there's pain and there's grief. And I think sometimes we get into that high level debate around assets and who's going to get what and fighting for the things that we forget that there is this deep emotional grief going on. And I had a friend turn to me, and of course she was a social worker, a therapist, a wise woman. And she said, Karen, I hear you just rage on the situation and rage about your former spouse. And the reality is you're just taking the poison every day and hoping he dies. Stop it. Just stop it. And as litigators, as coaches, as therapists, I think we have a responsibility to help our clients to set down the rage. It does not serve you, and it certainly will not serve you long term.
No, it doesn't. And it's expensive. I remember when I talk to clients more, I'd always tell them, I said, the more angry you get, the bigger my bonus gets. And I was being very callous on purpose just to try to take it away and say, look, it doesn't do you any good. As you were talking, I kept thinking about the sunken cost fallacy. That, hey, I've invested so much time into this relationship, I have to keep investing time. So when you're talking to couples, how do you address this and say, this is the same thing that gamblers do. This is the same thing that treasure hunters do. You're doing the same thing with a bad relationship now, saying, hey, I've invested so much time in it, I've got to keep suffering. How do you address that?
Yes. Well, it goes back to some of what I was just saying, Charles, that we can see the off ramp, and with grace and dignity, we can make a choice. But if you find yourself in that downward spiral, what I always remind them is, especially if you have children, for the most part, those children were born of love. There was a love story. And just because the marriage is complete, that doesn't mean that we dismiss the love story and that it doesn't matter or that it never mattered, as if this event of divorce eclipses everything that came before it. So we can take the investment of time, we can take the investment of all the work that we've done in that relationship and actually carry it forward with us rather than dismissing everything that happened before this moment in time and celebrating and knowing, again, it's not the end of the relationship. It's a newly renovated relationship. And often I'm working with clients to give them new tools about parenting style, co-parenting, communication, moving away from the passive aggressive poking that might have been happening at the end of that marriage. And it's not unusual for some time in the process for a couple to come to me and like, we're getting along really well now, Karen, and things are going really smoothly. Maybe we don't have to continue. And a colleague said, Karen, you're such a bad divorce coach that people don't want to get divorced anymore once they start working with you. I've graduated many couples and will continue to do so. And I hope that they do go into their next chapter with some renewed skills.
On your podcast and in your bio too, you talk a lot about the transition, whether it's a transition with kids or without kids. Can you walk us through what that looks like and the best way for those who are listening that are going through this transition? Kind of what are some of those tips or tools that you utilize?
Well, there's the big T transition, Dan, which is I was married and now I'm unmarried. And then there's the micro, all the time transitions that happen with our children as they move from home to home, which honestly is the one part of divorce that I wish didn't have to exist. And I'm proud to say when I talk to my own children, and I did interview my daughter on my podcast, she had a few things to say about her divorce experience. So when she turned 18 and went off to college, and she will say that, the hardest part is just living across two homes. And for those of us that travel a lot, packing, unpacking, oh, I don't have the socks I need. Oh, I forgot that notebook I need. So when it comes to the micro transitions that help happen with your children every week, maybe multiple times a week, maybe once a month. I mean, our kids and our parenting plan, we've kept really dynamic. When they were young, it was maybe a 2-2-5-5 schedule. And then once they got to middle school and post-pandemic, they're like, can we just, we went week to week and then we went to 2 weeks and now they drive and they hardly care about us. They're like, I'm just going to stay put for a month with all my stuff. And then I'll do a big move and then I'll stay put for a month in the other house. And we've always tried to be flexible in our transitions. But I would say not only flexibility over time, but really mindfulness that your child is leaving one kind of environment and re-entering a different environment. And they need time and space to try and make those transition times neutral, for parents to take the responsibility that if gear needs to be shuffled around, you're the one who's shuffling it on behalf of the kids. That we give them enough notice, especially when they're young. Maybe you post a calendar in the house, that you're talking about it at least 24 hours in advance. Tomorrow's a day when we're going to transition to our other home. What are the things that we need to have with us? If something gets forgotten, that you don't become a passive aggressive parent like, well, I see the soccer cleats sitting by the front door. That's going to be a disaster this afternoon. And fine, dad never wants to listen. The only person who suffers in that really is your child. You're trying to punish your other co-parent because maybe they don't have their poop in a group. But the one who doesn't have their soccer cleats is your kid. So I could do in fact, I have done whole podcasts on just transitions with kids. In terms of ourselves and this big transition, I think as a culture, we really underestimate the impact that divorce has on individuals. And whether we're an employer, right? Divorce is not typically a part of Family Medical Leave Act. We don't get supported time off, even though we recognize it to be one of the greatest crises of time. Changing job, death of a loved one, a move, divorce, we're in the top 5. It's on the ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Divorce hits that list. And somehow we take folks who are going through divorce and we often just isolate into the cave of shame. So if you are someone who is supporting or witnessing a divorce, think about how you can show up. I always say if someone had died in my family or had been diagnosed with cancer, I would have had a casserole on my front porch every other day. But because I was going through divorce, it was kind of crickets and silence. And then we suffer in silence in that transition. And I realized, and this might be the truth for you listeners, that we have to educate and get really clear with our community of support of what we're going through, what we need, what's helpful, and what's not helpful. And then we move into that new reality of, oh my gosh, I have an entire week to myself where I'm not parenting. This is what I refer to as the divorgasmic stage, right? There's almost a guilt of like, this kind of feels good and I'm going to date other people and I've got freedom and I can take trips and I don't have to pack the snack bag before I leave the house. We can also get a little out of control during that time, but we stretch our wings. And I would say on the other side of that kind of euphoric feeling of maybe freedom and reinvention, There's also what I refer to as the divorce phantom pain. And I'm not an amputee. That's when we usually use this language, like there's an absence of something that's gone, but it's like I can still feel it. And I had a moment when I was walking through a park with my dog on my own on one of my off-duty days, where I was the off-duty parent, always a parent, but not always the on-duty parent. And I saw this intact family with their kids on the swing and them being sweet to each other. And it gutted me. I could not get out of that park fast enough because I suddenly felt the absence of my intact family, of my spouse. And knowing that when you move through that transition of divorce, it's a little like being a ping pong in a shoebox. You're all over the place. And you really don't know what emotion's going to pop up and when it's going to pop up.
I was laughing about your soccer cleats story because I was sitting at one of my child's activities the other day, and I saw these two parents who are clearly divorced. And the mom looked over at the dad and was like, "Did you bring the water bottle?" And the mom had brought the child. And he was like, "No, but you brought the kid." And she's like, "But it was your turn to bring the water bottle." And he goes, "But you brought the kid. Like, why did you just bring the water bottle?" And he got up and went and bought his kid something to drink, like went to the store. But I was like, man, that poor little guy. You also had me thinking when you're talking about communication, how important it is this process. I've been divorced. And I remember, I showed up to a family event one time. My parents were like, "Hey, where's your wife?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I got divorced." And that's about as far as my communication went. And I mean, literally, when I had my last child, the place I worked at, I didn't even take any paternity leave, even though they offered it, and nobody knew I had a child because that's how I communicate. I didn't even cancel my meetings. I was in the delivery room just still doing my meetings because it was easier for me to do that than to communicate with people that something was happening in my personal.
Charles, we might need an intervention with you.
We might, but how do you take people that have that inability to open up on that side of communication and help them through a process where communication is ultimately going to be what's best for their children and their extended family and everybody involved?
Yes. And this is part of my practice of when I might be working with the couple one week and all three of us, we're doing the project management, right? We need to gather all of our financial information. We're working on disclosures. We're starting to talk about the parenting plan. But then the next week, I'll be with each of those individuals one on one. And that's where they can begin to process and have a space for the emotional journey that they're going through. And I would say to someone, like you, Charles, that our conversation is going to start with, cracking that open a bit. What is inside? Where are your fears? What is it that you might be protecting yourself from at your own demise? And who might you identify? We talk about that circle of support. And I think of it a little bit like a galaxy. So if you're the solar plexus, you're the sun, who's the Mercury? Who are those that orbit most closely to you? And then we've got the people who are kind of Pluto, right? Which we kind of should probably vote out of the galaxy because they're not helping us. They're the ones who want to keep picking at the scab. And I talk about these wounds of divorce and that emotional part kind of like a scab. I'm going to get a little graphic here, folks. And we all know when something's trying to heal over and it's almost there and we go back in and we pick at it again, and then it might ooze a little more and it might bleed a little more and we feel the pain of it. Well, that's one of the things that when I'm working with couples together, we're like, we're not going there. The past cannot be changed. It's done. And our first agreement is do no more harm. And that means every text message, every communication that exists, every roll of the eye, every passive aggressive huff and puff can do harm. Enough harm has been done. That's what got us here. So we're not going to go back and pick that scab anymore. We want it to actually heal and scar over. And every scar has a story. And sometimes we have scars that we're really proud of, like, this was that wound when the shark bit me diving. And this was a motorcycle accident I survived. Well, we have the scars of divorce as well that show I've come through something really difficult and really hard, and I did survive. But it doesn't bleed anymore. It doesn't hurt in the same way. And in some ways, most of us know who have scars that the nerve endings in the scar itself, they kind of go dead. You can poke around the scar and feel it, but that deep deep pain. That's what we're trying to just heal and to move on. So I hope that folks like you, Charles, that are listening, who might have their walls of protection up, and I don't dismiss that. We all find our ways of coping, but that there might be some people in your inner galaxy that you can really lean on, or find a coach or a therapist that is trained to help guide you as you navigate the difficult emotional landscape of this transition.
You talk about walls, and what I'm hearing is, communication is a huge barrier and can just be a wall that it's hard to tear down. How do you walk clients through and advise them that you can communicate with each other and in front of the kids and talk to the kids and make this experience as positive as it can be? Because the kids know that mom and dad are no longer going to be in the same home together. And how do you communicate that this is actually a good thing and not a bad thing?
Well, I think sometimes we overcomplicate stuff, Dan, even just like you're saying, like using the language, and when we're getting ready to tell our children, right? And this is a big part of when families come to me, and if they are at the starting gate and they haven't told anyone, then I become their communication manager. And we not only talk about what we say to the kids, but where we say it, when we say it. And I was recently coaching a family, and dad said, well, if we do it Saturday morning, it's going to kind of ruin the weekend. I don't know. Maybe just Monday morning before they head off to school. And like the alarm bells are going off in my head, and realizing how underskilled we are generally, which is why I had a career for 25 years and still work in corporate America, helping people manage relationships and difficult conversations. I mean, you think about our education system, and I come from a family of educators. I hail our educators, but we still have a fairly archaic system that's spending a lot more time teaching us how to do long division than how to have a difficult discussion. And what we need as adults is how to have difficult discussions. So learning about a soft start, learning about that language, and using not what is going to go wrong. So often when we're leading change management, and whether I'm working with an executive of a large company or two parents, you're leading a change initiative. We spend so much time focusing on what's going to change. We forget to emphasize what's not going to change. Here's the things that Santa is still going to find you wherever your stocking is hung. We are always going to be your parent team. You came from love. That is not changing. Your grandma and grandpa from both sides of your family, right? My kids gave me the shocker when they said, Mom, are we going to get new brothers and sisters? That would be so fun. I was horrified thinking about my former spouse repartnering and bringing another mother and new children into the family. And it was my children who saw the abundance that was possible for our family and not the scarcity. So much of this is mindset. So much of getting to a good divorce is first recognizing that's one of the options. I can have a good divorce. And we can bring these communication skills and how we change our language. And now there's wonderful apps, because some families, I can almost hear your listeners out there like, but you don't understand my narcissistic spouse. You don't understand my spouse who is an addict. You don't understand my spouse who's abusive. That is a different category and requires a different set of boundaries and protections. And my heart breaks for those of you that are navigating that journey. But there's a lot of us normal neurotics in the world who just need to get unmarried without a lot of drama, debt, and destruction. And we can help you to do that.
I like how you keep comparing this to your past in the business world. We have a podcast called The Business Blueprint. And so frequently we talk about communication and having these difficult conversations and understanding that a lot of what we do is a financial transaction. In divorce, like you say, communication, having a difficult conversation, understanding that the process of divorce is almost a financial transaction, right? You've got to uncouple these assets. So, how much is your past in business help you in your current endeavor?
I love that you're business nerds as well. Thanks for the question, Charles. They are so intertwined. I've had a really interesting zigzag career, as often is the case for folks. My first degree is in theater dance performance. I'm an entertainer. That's where I began. And then I took a path, a diversion in grad school, and became a therapist. And as I was working at a retreat center that was overseeing, it was a medically supervised camp for children and young adults diagnosed with cancer, we started to have corporate groups there. And that was my entry point into leadership development, workplace culture. And as I said, over 20 years, I've been mediating, leading, guiding, and coaching in the corporate arena. And, my belief is what happens at the desk goes home to the dining room table and vice versa. We spend a lot of our waking hours at work. So it's a place where we actually can make a lot of social change by creating great places to work for people that radiate a vibrant, thriving environment. And that's what we send out the door at the end of the day. And we spend a lot of time in relationship with our coworkers. In most cases, we will see our coworkers for more of our waking hours every week than our spouses, our kids, our cats, our dogs, your cows, whatever the case might be. So investing in those relationships is very, very relevant, in my opinion. And it has laid a foundation. And what I see is not only the relationship tools. I'm a gracious space facilitator, which just means bringing people together who have differing opinions and helping them to see both sides, which is kind of the essence of two people who are looking to get divorced. Like, we do not see the world in the same way anymore. I'm a crucial conversations trainer, which is a wonderful program that has been designed through Crucial Learning. And they have a lot of different curriculums to help people learn skills. Because again, most of us arrive in our adult life underskilled in relationship, what I refer to as relationship literacy. We've got reading, writing, and arithmetic. Can we please add relationships to the list? Because nobody's ever hired me to help them with long division, only difficult relationships. And then there's just the project management part. Again, helping companies lead big change initiatives, helping companies celebrate the good work that's happening. So it's not uncommon for me to sit with a couple and we'll have laughter. We'll reminisce. I often will have them start a session with me one of two ways. Tell me about your wedding day. Tell me about how you met, right? Like, let's reconnect to the love story, and tell me about your children. Tell me about their arrival in this world. Tell me about their personalities. It puts their heart in the right place as we, again, renovate the family. Don't destroy it. Don't tear it down. We renovate it into this kind of new shape and form that is more than a financial transaction. Because when you're done with your work, you lawyers, right? And you've gotten all the litigation, you've gotten all the assets. Well, they still have a life to live together. That has nothing to do with who ended up with the Jaguar and who got the beach house, or who ended up with the debt, or how we split the debt, right? Because we all end up with a little bit less as we enter this new world. We go from a 2-income household often to a single income household, and having to reinvent and rebudget. So getting people prepared for the long run. I'm grateful to the lawyers who help us get divorced, but it's the divorce coaches and consultants who help us to know how to be divorced, because that's the lifelong journey. I'm delighted because I still spend about 50% of my time in corporate America and 50% of my time in the personal, private family world of families that have come through divorce, either before, during, or after.
Karen, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. I am always very, obviously I like doing the litigation and part of divorce, but I do beg people like, hey, that there's more out there, right? Even though I may be a closed off individual myself, I always tell them there's more out there. You probably need help. You need to worry about your children. So where can our listeners go to avail themselves of your services?
Well, I want to invite folks to tune into my sister podcast to yours, The Good Divorce Show. And you can just Google that up. We're in our second season, where you will find experts such as yourselves, as well as families retelling their stories, so that, I think storytelling is so powerful when we hear two parents sitting down and chatting 5 years post-divorce, laughing, honoring, talking about their kids. It gives us an imagination of what is possible. And then KarenMcNenny.com, or more easily, thegooddivorcecoach.com is where you can find me. I've got resources there. I work with clients throughout the country before, whether people are just in the considering, should we not, can we? Sometimes I'll help with some discernment counseling in that period. The during, we are unraveling our lives. And sometimes I will have families come to me who are just looking for co-parenting support. And they've been divorced for a couple of years, but the co-parenting part has not gotten any better, or they didn't have the foundation of skills that they needed as they move into their now divorced reality. So I'm there to help those families as well. The Good
Great.
Divorce Coach.
Thank you very much. And if you all liked it, please hit subscribe and like. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. We love to answer questions, and we are excited to talk to you next time.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast. If you found this episode helpful and you want more informational content, please be sure to subscribe and join us on all major social media platforms, including YouTube. Stay connected for more exciting updates and tips.